Logan got his new job at the upscale car gallery just 6 months ago, and in that short time, it upended everything I thought I understood about him and about myself. He had always been driven, but I never expected him to land something so enviable at only 23. The kind of salary he brings in now dwarfs what I earned in my first decade of teaching. I should feel nothing but pride. And I do. Mostly. But there's also something else. A murmur in the background of my thoughts. A low, restless flicker that I try not to listen to too closely. Maybe it's how Logan moves through the house now. His steps carrying a quiet authority, like he's become someone new and doesn't quite fit in his old skin anymore. Maybe it's the stories he tells over dinner, about sleek roads he's driven, people with lives stitched together by elegance and speed. He's living a life I only understand in pieces, bits of it flickering from his phone screen, others whispered between bites of pasta while my husband, Patrick, scrolls endlessly on his device and barely looks up. Patrick has always been stable, grounded in a way I once found reassuring. He's steady like a tree that doesn't notice the seasons passing around it. And yet, lately I find my eyes drifting to Logan instead. There's a tension there, a recognition I don't have a name for. Logan sees me in a way Patrick hasn't in years. "Mom, did you do something different with your hair?" he asked last Thursday, leaning against the kitchen island, watching as I chopped zucchini. I glanced up, surprised. "You think so?" He nodded, lips curving into a smile that lingered. "Yeah, it really suits you." Patrick, sitting at the dining table, didn't look up from his tablet. That night I spent an unusual amount of time in front of the mirror. It wasn't a new haircut, just a subtle shift in parting, a little more volume. But Logan had noticed the way people do when they're truly looking. It was a Saturday afternoon when I really felt it, whatever it is. I had spent the morning elbow deep in lesson plans and felt an urge to do something for myself, just something light. I pulled on a pair of fitted jeans and a sleeveless coral top. Simple, flattering, enough to remind me I wasn't invisible. I came downstairs and found Logan stretched across the couch, scrolling his phone. He looked up, and something flickered in his expression. Surprise. Admiration. His smile returned quickly, but the pause was long enough to make my stomach twist. "Heading out?" he asked, phone still in hand. "Just needed some air." "You look really good." 2 words. Just that. But his tone, the way his eyes held mine, it lingered longer than it should have. I left the house with my pulse a little faster than it ought to be. The moments keep stacking up now. Quiet, persistent like stones in my shoes. I tell myself I'm imagining it, but I'm not. And the hardest part to admit, I don't want to stop. At first, Logan's small gestures felt harmless. A daily coffee from that little shop by the freeway. A citrus-scented candle he said reminded him of something I once baked. But they evolved. One afternoon, he came home with a high-end pair of sunglasses, slipping them onto the counter beside my cup of tea. "These are way too expensive," I said, eyebrows raised. He shrugged. "They're fun. You always squint when you drive, and I figured, why not?" Then came a leather jacket, soft and form-fitting, as if he'd known my exact measurements without asking. And then, bright, gorgeous sneakers I never would have chosen for myself. Too youthful, too bold. But I slipped them on and felt something electric. "Logan," I said, cradling the box in my arms. "You shouldn't be spending all this money on me." He leaned back against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I make good money. I want to treat you. You deserve it." Patrick, sitting at the dining table with headphones on, didn't even glance up. Logan's gifts had a pattern. They weren't just generous. They were deliberate. Every piece he gave me brought a little more color into my closet, a little more brightness into my reflection. "You dress like someone who thinks the world isn't watching," I teased him one evening as he handed me a vivid emerald blouse. He laughed, entirely unbothered in his usual black jeans and monochrome tee. "I like simple things. But you should light up a room." I felt a sudden warmth in my chest I didn't know how to name. His compliments grew more frequent, tossed into conversations like pebbles into a pond. "Never too much. Always enough. That shade looks amazing on you. You smell nice today. I bet your students adore you." Patrick never said things like that. Not anymore. Maybe that's why they pierced through me like they did, gentle and devastating. And then came the night by the water. I had been wrapped in deadlines and meetings, the house humming with the static of routine. The silence between Patrick and me had deepened again into something more like distance than peace. "I need to get out for a while," I said, stepping into the living room where Logan was lounging on the couch. He looked up. "Want company?" I hadn't expected him to say that. But he stood before I could answer, slipping on his jacket like it was the most natural thing in the world. The beach was deserted, the tide low and lazy. The stars glittered above us like secrets they couldn't hold. "I don't think I've ever been here this late," he murmured, kicking at the sand. "It's different at night," I said. "Better." We walked in silence for a while. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was charged like the stillness before a summer storm. "I like this," he said finally. "Just us." I glanced sideways at him, the moonlight catching on the edge of his profile. "You live with me," I said, teasing. He laughed, shaking his head. "You know what I mean." There was something about the way he looked at me then, unguarded, steady, that made my heart race. I looked away first. "We should go," I said too softly. "Yeah," he echoed. But we didn't move. And when we finally turned back, our hands brushed for the briefest second. It was nothing. Coincidence. But my skin remembered it long after the moment passed. I told myself I was imagining it. But I wasn't. I hadn't planned on buying Logan anything. I'd gone to the mall just to walk, to breathe in something other than the recycled air of our house or the scent of fading printer ink from my classroom. But as I passed a menswear store, a display caught my eye. A rack of soft-toned t-shirts folded neatly under the soft glow of track lighting. One of them, dusty pink just shy of blush, made me stop. It was a color Logan would never choose for himself. His wardrobe was a monochrome archive of black tees and steel-gray hoodies, the occasional dark denim. But something about that pink shirt made me think of him. Not the image he curated, but the version of him I saw when we were talking over coffee or walking down the beach, laughing at nothing. Without thinking, I bought it. Back at home, he was sprawled on the couch, arm draped over the cushion like he belonged there. He looked up when I walked in, one eyebrow arched in question. "What's in the bag?" he asked, eyes narrowing with mock suspicion. I set it on the coffee table. "It's for you. Just try it on." He sat up, surprise flickering across his face. "You got me something." "Just a shirt. I thought it'd suit you." He pulled it from the bag, holding it up between two fingers like it was some foreign object. "Pink. Light pink," I corrected, suppressing a smile. "It'll look great. Trust me." His laugh was skeptical but amused. "You really think I can pull this off?" "I know you can." He sighed and stood. All right. Let's see what the fuss is about." He pulled his black t-shirt off in one fluid motion, revealing the clean lines of muscle beneath, toned but not boastful, carved by routine, by the hours he must have put in when I wasn't watching. I'd seen him shirtless 100 times. He was my son after all. But something about this moment was different. The way the afternoon light hit his skin, the way he stood in front of me so casually, completely unguarded, it knocked something loose in me. I inhaled sharply. He noticed. "Wow," I muttered too quietly. He grinned. "Wow what?" I waved a hand. "Nothing. Just put the shirt on." He pulled it over his head. It clung softly to his frame, the muted pink bright against his skin. He turned to the mirror behind the couch, tilting his head thoughtfully. "Ha," he said. "I actually kinda like it." I tried to speak but ended up just smiling. "Told you." He looked back at me, his expression softer now. "Thanks, Emily. Really. That was thoughtful." There was something behind his eyes when he said it. Not flirtation. Not overt. But something else, something gentler. Reverent. It made me want to look away and look closer at the same time. Then he broke the moment with a grin. "So does this mean I'm trendy now?" "Oh yes," I said, nudging his arm. "You're practically a fashion icon." We laughed, and the moment passed. But later that night, as I lay in bed beside Patrick, his body curled away from mine like always, I couldn't stop thinking about how Logan had looked in that shirt, about how I had looked at him, and how he had looked back. The next morning I avoided Logan. Not intentionally. I just suddenly found tasks to keep me busy. Laundry that didn't need doing, surfaces to clean that weren't dirty. I told myself I was being silly, letting one innocent moment take root and grow into something that wasn't real. But it was real. And it had been building long before yesterday. That evening, Patrick had fallen asleep early. I padded quietly to the kitchen, craving tea but not the silence. As the water boiled, I stood at the window, watching the sky stretch into indigo. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. Couldn't sleep. Logan's voice was low. I turned and found him leaning against the doorway, barefoot, arms crossed. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair tousled. He looked soft, human. Like the boy I'd raised and the man I was only beginning to see clearly. "Just tea," I said, lifting the mug slightly. He crossed the room, opened the cupboard behind me, and reached for his own. "Mind if I join you?" I hesitated. "No, not at all." We sat at the kitchen table in silence, steam curling from our cups. Felt strange, domestic, but something else too. Something edged with an awareness I didn't have the strength to dismiss. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally, staring into his cup. He nodded. "Are you happy?" he asked. "With Dad?" The question lodged itself in my throat. He looked up at me slowly. "You don't have to answer." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "It's complicated." "That's not a yes." "No," I admitted. "It's not." Logan didn't push. He just nodded, slow and sad, like he'd already known the answer. The clock ticked on. Neither of us moved. Then he said quietly, "I think about you sometimes. About how different you seem when you talk to me. It's like you're more alive." My heart stopped. "Logan," I said, the word barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't." "I know," he interrupted. "I'm not saying anything should happen. I notice you. That's all." And then he stood. And then he walked away, leaving me there, staring into my tea, my pulse racing, my world tilting just a little more than it had before. I didn't speak to Logan much for the next few days. Not out of avoidance exactly, but because I didn't trust what might slip out if I did. It wasn't what he said that haunted me. It was how easily he said it. "I think about you sometimes." He didn't say it with shame. There was no awkwardness, no apology in his tone. Just a quiet honesty that left me spinning. I tried to distract myself. I dove into grading papers, reorganizing kitchen drawers, even replanting the neglected herb garden behind the house. I went on long walks with no destination. I lingered in grocery store aisles longer than necessary. Anything to avoid looking too closely at the truth. But I still saw him, passing in the hallway, padding barefoot across the kitchen in the mornings, laughter drifting from his room late at night. And each time I felt that same ache. A longing I didn't understand. Or maybe I understood it too well. It all came to a head one rainy Friday evening. Patrick was out of town for a conference. The house felt quieter than usual, wrapped in the hush of steady rainfall. I was curled up on the couch, an old blanket draped across my knees, trying and failing to get lost in a book I'd read a dozen times. Logan emerged from his room just as I gave up, setting the book on the coffee table. He looked surprised to find me there. "No plans tonight?" he asked, stepping into the living room. "Clearly not," I said, gesturing at my blanket. He smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was about to start a movie. Want to join?" Felt like an innocent question. Casual offer. But nothing felt casual anymore. Still I nodded. "Sure. Why not?" We settled on opposite ends of the couch, a safe distance apart. The movie flickered to life. A moody, atmospheric film I vaguely remembered from the early 2000s. For a while we just watched. But my attention wandered. The story blurred into shapes and colors. I was too aware of him. The way his shoulder pressed into the armrest. The way his knee jutted out slightly into the space between us. The way he kept glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Halfway through, the power flickered. And then, just like that, everything went black. "Well, that's not ideal," Logan said, sitting up straighter. "Storm must have knocked something out," I replied, already standing to look out the window. The streetlights were still glowing. Just our house. Logan grabbed his phone, flipping on the flashlight. "Want me to check the breaker?" "Please." He disappeared down the hallway. I stood at the window, watching the rain slide down the glass in steady ribbons. The silence pressed in. I wasn't sure what I was hoping would happen next. Minutes later, the lights blinked back on. When he returned, Logan looked almost disappointed to see everything restored to normal. "Heroic," I said softly. He gave a small bow. "All in a day's work." I started folding the blanket, meaning to say goodnight, to retreat to the safety of my room. But he stepped forward, catching the fabric mid-fold, his hand brushing mine. Eyes met. Neither of us moved. "I'm sorry," he said, but his voice was calm. "Certain. I know this is wrong. I know I shouldn't say what I'm thinking. But I don't think I can keep pretending." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Logan, I don't expect anything from you. I just need you to know. I see you, Emily. I always have." Even when he didn't. The silence between us stretched. I let go of the blanket. "I can't do this," I said. "We can't." His eyes didn't leave mine. "But you feel it, don't you?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to. He stepped back then, just a few inches. Enough to give me air. Enough to let me breathe again. "Good night," he said quietly. And then he turned and walked down the hallway, leaving me in a room that suddenly felt too full, too bright, too quiet. That night I lay awake for hours. Patrick had texted from the hotel. "Early flight tomorrow. See you at lunch." Nothing more. No questions. No warmth. Just the facts. I thought of Logan's voice again. Of the way he had said my name like it meant something. And then I thought of myself. Not the version I had become. The wife who cooked and graded and nodded through silent dinners. But the woman I used to be. Curious. Bold. Romantic. When had I become someone so good at pretending? What frightened me most wasn't that Logan felt something. It was that he saw something I'd long forgotten was still inside me. I wasn't sure what that meant. Or what I would do with it. But I knew this. The moment had passed, and yet it stayed with me, echoing through every quiet corner of the house like a song I couldn't turn off. Patrick returned on schedule, dropping his suitcase by the door and loosening his tie before he even greeted me. He kissed my cheek in a perfunctory way, like we were actors still reciting lines from a play we'd forgotten how to believe in. "Everything all right while I was gone?" he asked, glancing around the kitchen. "Quiet," I said. "The power went out during the storm." "Ah." He was already reaching for his phone, scrolling through emails as he nodded. I watched him from across the counter, the same way I used to watch Logan when he was younger, searching for signs of something deeper. But with Patrick, there was nothing left to find. He hadn't noticed the new vase on the table, or the change in the living room layout, or the subtle way I'd started styling my hair differently. He didn't see me, not really. Not anymore. That night we ate dinner in silence. Patrick read headlines on his tablet. I chewed slowly, the food turning to ash in my mouth. Logan didn't come down. I tried not to think about why. The days that followed felt like a quiet unraveling. Logan avoided me, and I let him. We moved around each other like ghosts. Polite, distant, careful. The energy between us had shifted again, but not in the way I feared. There was no bitterness in him, only restraint. And still, I caught the glances when he thought I wasn't looking. The hesitations at the kitchen door. The long pause outside my classroom when he came to drop off lunch one afternoon, unprompted. I didn't open it. Couldn't. Because if I let him in again, if I allowed even one word to soften, I knew I'd fall. So I stayed behind my lines. Until the night I found the sketch. I had been tidying the living room while Patrick slept on the couch, snoring gently beneath the flicker of the TV. Logan's sketchbook had been left open on the end table, a habit he'd picked up from childhood and never outgrown. I wasn't snooping. Not really. But the page caught my eye. It wasn't a landscape or a car or some comic-style drawing like he often did. It was a woman, sitting at a kitchen table, a tea mug between her hands. Her posture wasn't dramatic, but it was unmistakable. There was tenderness in the curve of her back, in the quiet way her face was tilted down as if lost in thought. He'd drawn me, and it was beautiful, so intimate, so still, as if the artist had memorized every line of her. I closed the book slowly, my breath shaking. The room suddenly felt too small. I went upstairs and locked the bathroom door, sat on the cold tile floor and let the weight of it settle around me. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. Whatever this was, it had crossed the line between imagination and something that lived and breathed between us, moving with every step we took. And I had no idea what to do with it. A week later, Logan came home late. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes by hand just to feel the heat in my fingers. He hesitated at the door like he wasn't sure if he should come in. "Hey," he said softly. Turned, nodded. "Hi." He stepped inside slowly. "You got my sketchbook." I stilled, fingers frozen above a soapy dish. I wasn't looking through it. I hoped you would. His voice was low, clear. I left it there on purpose. The silence stretched between us, warm and thick and unsteady. I meant what I said that night, he continued. I know it's complicated. I know it's wrong. But I'm not sorry for seeing you. I turned to face him fully now, the towel in my hands damp and forgotten. Logan. I started and then stopped. I didn't know what came after that. He stepped closer, not touching, not pushing. Just near. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that someone does see you. That you're not invisible. Tears sprang up before I could stop them. It wasn't romantic. Not really. Not in that moment. It was just truth. Pure, honest, unbearable truth. I shouldn't feel this way, I whispered. But you do, he said gently. And I nodded. 'Cause I did. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, watching the ceiling. Listening to the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. The faint creak of floorboards. The breathing of my husband, steady and indifferent. And in the quiet of my mind, I let myself ask the question I had buried again and again. What if Logan hadn't been my son? What if he were someone I'd met at work, or a stranger at a bookstore, or a man I passed on the street and felt that impossible pull toward? What if he had come into my life not by birth or circumstance, but by choice? I imagined 1,000 moments. Dinner, where he reached across the table and touched my hand. A walk in the park, where he brushed my hair from my face. A night like this, where his voice was the one that wrapped around me as I drifted off to sleep. And the worst part, I liked it better. Not because I wanted to destroy what we had, but because it made me feel alive again. Like someone who could still be seen, desired, loved. We didn't talk about it again. Not really. We slipped back into our roles, our rhythms, our rehearsed normalcy. But something had changed. And even though I never said a word, he knew. And I knew. And some nights that was enough. And others nearly broke me.